What's up, YouTube garden fiends? Today we're going to talk about the drought that we're in. We're going to get into it. I have some videos. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to start with Lake Powell.
Drought worsening across the Southwest and, of course, here in Arizona. The conditions have a huge impact for regions all along the Colorado River Basin and western parts of our state. Lake Powell has fallen below 3,500 feet. It's the lowest level since the federal government dammed the Colorado River at Glen Canyon Dam more than a half a century ago. But the concerns go beyond agriculture and drinking water. It also impacts the hydroelectricity that millions rely on.
So we've been in a over 20-year drought, and there's been constant development in Arizona. The real estate development is part of the problem, but also the agricultural industry is a huge part of the problem. They're the biggest water users in Arizona is the agricultural industry.
And as we sit here tonight, Lake Powell is just 35 feet away from what experts call the minimum power pool.
But with water drying up faster than officials expected, the ramifications could affect what's below Lake Powell, potentially impacting wildlife in the Grand Canyon and even hit a dead pool, the point at which water likely would fail to flow through the dam and onto Lake Mead.
So let's go a little bit into what is a dead pool. Okay, a dead pool occurs when water in a reservoir drops so low that it can't flow downstream from the dam. So that means that once Lake Powell hits dead pool status, it's not going to be able to send water to Lake Mead. If you're new to Arizona, the way that it works here in terms of the water is most of it comes from the Colorado River. It goes into Lake Powell, then into Lake Mead, and then I believe from Lake Mead it goes to Lake Havasu, from Lake Havasu to Lake Pleasant, and from Lake Pleasant to the city of Phoenix and beyond. The other waterway would be the Verde River that goes into Bartlett Lake, and then goes back into the Verde River and then into the city. So the other waterway system would be the Salt River that comes in from the reservation to Roosevelt Lake. And then from Roosevelt Lake, it goes to Apache Lake. I believe it's Canyon Lake, Saguaro Lake, and then back to the Salt River and into the city. So that's kind of how the drinking water works here. So Lake Mead is the biggest source of drinking water for the state. The biggest concerns are Lake Powell behind Glen Canyon Dam on the Utah-Arizona border and Lake Mead behind Boulder Canyon Dam on the Nevada-Arizona border. These two reservoirs, the largest in the US, and they're drying up. They're the largest reservoirs and they're drying up. Provide water for drinking and irrigation and hydroelectricity to millions of people in Nevada, Arizona, and California. Mexico is also part of this. I don't know if I was going to get into this, but we will get into it later. Some media reports incorrectly define dead pool as the point at which a dam no longer has enough water to generate hydroelectricity. The more accurate term for this situation is the minimum power pool elevation. A 22-year drought in the Colorado River Basin lingers. Reaching minimum power pool elevation is the first problem. Lakes Powell and Mead have turbines at the base of their dams well below the surface of the reservoirs. Water flows through valves in intake towers in the reservoirs and is channeled through the turbines, making them spin to generate electricity. These systems rely on what hydrologists call hydraulic head, the amount of liquid pressure above a given point. The higher the level of water above the turbines in Lake Powell and Lake Mead, the more hydraulic head they have and the more power they will generate. When the level in a reservoir approaches minimum power pool elevation, the turbines lose capacity to produce power as they start to take in air along with water. and must be shut down before they are damaged. A reservoir that reaches this point usually has quite a bit of water left before it drops to dead pool and water stops flowing from the dam. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation recently announced unprecedented changes in its regulation of the water in Lake Mead and Lake Powell. First, the Bureau will retain in Lake Powell pretty much like 500,000 acre feet of water that was scheduled to flow down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon and into Lake Mead for use by California, Nevada, and Arizona. So, and then it gives you what 1 acre foot is. So it's a huge amount of water, huge amount of water. And that went into effect this year. So we're not going to get that water this year, and it's a huge deal. Second, the Bureau will release an additional 500,000 acre feet from Flaming Gorge Dam on the Wyoming-Utah border. Water from the Flaming Gorge flows into the Green River and eventually into Lake Powell. The water level in Lake Powell was 3,522 feet on April 30th, 2022, just 32 feet above the minimum power pool elevation of 3,490 feet. Deadpool is 120 feet lower at 3,370 feet. And this is old. I'm pretty sure we've hit that by now. So right here, this little graph just kind of tells you where we're headed. We're headed to losing this water. The Bureau acted suddenly because the levels in both lakes have dropped far faster than anyone forecast. In the last year, Lake Mead dropped 22 feet, Lake Powell 40 feet. Extreme drought and climate change partially explain this rapid decline. Another factor is that the Glen and Boulder canyons are V-shaped like martini glasses, wide at the rim and narrow at the bottom. As levels in the lakes decline, each foot of elevation holds less water. For now, finding enough water to keep generating electricity is the focus. But unless California, Nevada, and Arizona make big cuts in the amount of water they use, Deadpool and Lake Powell and Lake Mead can't be ruled out. And it's not going to happen. There's too much farming happening in these three states for that to happen. And we're going to cover that, the big generator of this crisis is conventional big corporate farms. Okay, and this is from The Conservation. It's an academic journal, and I believe it's ran by the U of A. The author is Robert Glennon. He's a Regent Professor and Morris K. Udall Professor of Law and Public Policy at the University of Arizona. Robert Glennon does not work for, consult, own shares in, or receive funding from any company or organization that would benefit from this article, and has disclosed no relevant affiliations beyond their academic appointments. Okay, so this is legit. Okay, we watched that video. Let's check this out.
Our big story tonight, an urgent warning from federal officials. Arizona's water crisis could put some communities in danger, and they need Western states' help to prevent it. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Kadiba Devine.
I'm Mark Curtis. The state's top water official tells 12 News he never thought this day would come so quickly. Team 12's Bram Resnick has more from that interview and the Fed's emergency request. Bram?
Yeah, this is one more alarming escalation of the state's water crisis. Arizona Water Director Tom Bishotsky stressed during today's taping of Sunday Square Off that the feds issued a public safety and health warning. Northern Arizona communities could lose their drinking water.
I never thought this day would come this quickly, but I think we always knew that this day was potentially out there.
Tom Bishotsky.
So he's an older man, and he probably thought he was gonna die before this happened. I always knew that within my lifetime we were gonna run out of water, and I've been acting accordingly.
Bishotsky's been shepherding Arizona's water supply for 40 years. Now he's seeing the state's main water source at Lake Mead and Lake Powell vanish at a rate few had predicted, and it could put people in danger. The latest warning sign? An emergency request to Western states from the U.S. Department of the Interior to cut their water deliveries. The goal is to keep water levels at Lake Powell high enough to support the power grid and future water supplies.
I don't think it's gonna be possible to keep Lake Powell and Lake Mead in operation for hydroelectric power. I need to check, but I'm pretty sure we're already at Deadpool status.
A letter from the Interior Department warns the best available science indicates that the effects of climate change will continue to adversely impact the basin. Here's why there's a new urgency. If Lake Powell's levels continue to fall, the letter says access to drinking water could be cut off for the 7,500 residents of Page, Arizona, at the southwestern tip of the reservoir, and the neighboring Navajo community of Lachee.
The letter uses the words health and safety, and it will come down to that.
So this is what it's gonna look like. Communities are gonna lose their water. And a big part of that is corporate farming. The biggest water users are corporate farms.
really getting to a health and safety issue.
When they say health and safety, whose health and whose safety are they talking about?
The health and safety of those who want to turn on the tap and have wet water.
Arizona and other
That guy was shocked when he heard that. He was so shocked. They're gonna cut the water off. It's coming. It's coming. In the next 2-3 years, there's gonna be major water restrictions in Arizona.
western states have 1 week to respond to the Interior Department's request.
We will take actions to protect Arizona,
But this is far from the last of Arizona's tough water conversations.
but we're going to have to learn to live with less water.
This is the full interview. Let's go through it real quick.
Trotsky is one of the most influential people in Arizona and the West when it comes to managing our water. He's worked on water issues for 40 years. As director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources,
So I'm of the opinion that this dude failed us. This guy right here, he failed us. He's been in this position for 40 years, and there was no sense of urgency until now. I don't know. I don't know. I'm a little frustrated with all the whole boomer generation that has all these critical roles and positions, and they're just not doing what needs to be done.
he has a hand in virtually every aspect of state water policy. Director Tom Brashatsky, welcome back to Square Off.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We'll find out soon. The headlines are alarming. I'm hopeful you can give our viewers a really clear-eyed look at the short-term water future here in Arizona. And I want to start by asking you to give us kind of a hydrology lesson. Lots of folks watching might be newcomers to the valley, to Arizona. So explain the roles of Lake Mead and Lake Powell in supplying our water and
So if you're not from Arizona and you're thinking about coming to Arizona because the real estate is cheap and the cost of living is cheap, don't come here. We don't have the water for you. It's only going to get worse. The more people that come, the worse it's going to be. And the real estate is part of the problem, but again, the biggest culprits are the corporate farms, conventional corporate farms.
generating electricity.
And so Lake Mead and Lake Powell are on the Colorado River, and the Colorado River supplies 40% or so of Arizona's water supply. Those reservoirs are designed to capture the
So that is 40%. We're going to lose access to 40% of our water because it's going to get so low that it cannot be tapped into. We're not going to be able to pump water out of those reservoirs. And that is 40% of our water.
water in years when the flow of the river is really high, and then parse that water out over the subsequent years. So we have a steady water supply. Unfortunately, lately the flow of the river has been declining, and it's because of the drier, hotter future, and maybe the drier, hotter today. That's due to climate change.
So I see respected water managers, policy.
So I have lived in Arizona my entire life, and I can attest to the fact that it is much hotter here and it is a lot drier. So I do think that the water is evaporating. When the snow melts, a lot of it is seeping into the soil and not getting into the river.
Policymakers, people you know and work with, using words like dire and bleak to describe the state of Lake Mead and Lake Powell. How bleak is the water outlook?
So in the next couple of years, we're not really in danger of having to shut off the taps to the home. But the levels of the lakes are such that become difficult.
I don't believe him. There's already people losing their water. There's already people losing their water right now. It's on the table, y'all. We just saw that Page, Arizona, parts of the Navajo Nation. We're in a major, major drought. There are going to be communities that are going to lose access to their tap water.
To move water past the dams the way the infrastructure is designed. So even if there's water in the dam, it might be limited in terms of how much can come out. Obviously, then the reservoir levels in Lake Mead, which receives water from Lake Powell, are going to drop if that occurs.
And how soon could that happen?
So if we do not take any action, that could happen as soon as 2023, with maybe the impacts really being felt in a couple of years past that, 2024 or 2025.
Next year. So folks hearing you saying that's not going to affect your taps.
But it is. It is, and I think it's going to happen sooner than he's projecting. I think, by 2023, 2024, it's going to be very obvious that we have to change the way that we're using water in our landscapes. And all these permaculture folks in Phoenix telling you to plant hundreds of fruit trees are going to finally have to eat crow after all these years. I've been doing this work for a super long time, and I'm so frustrated with the folks in Phoenix. Like, y'all are not doing permaculture. What y'all are doing is just going to some property and putting hundreds of fruit trees, irrigating it with canal water, because a lot of the houses in Phoenix that are on the canal system have water rights, and you're being just as bad as these big corporate farms. It's not sustainable. It's not okay. It's not permaculture. Permaculture is establishing a regenerative system, which means a ecosystem that can reproduce itself. That means that it doesn't need you to replicate itself. And the only way you're going to get to a regenerative system in the Sonoran Desert is to use Sonoran Desert edible plants. A food forest in the Sonoran Desert is not a bunch of fruit trees that are exotic plants. They're not from here. It is a system that incorporates native edible plants so that we can all thrive. The plants can thrive on minimal rainwater, and we can thrive because we can harvest them and eat them and all that.
But this very bad thing could happen in just a year. Might have trouble processing that answer. Explain that.
It's because the providers who provide water to your tap have multiple water supplies, and they also have groundwater that they can pump from wells. And we have water stored under the ground for that purpose. So there are.
You cannot rely on the groundwater here, and we'll get into that later, but groundwater supplies will definitely be depleted by the big corporate farms, and we're going to get into that. Arizona has super lax groundwater laws.
There are methods to help backfill those reductions, but if they occur over a very long period of time or become very, very large, then we could have some problems.
So there is some urgency. The U.S. Department of the Interior is asking Arizona and other states to respond this week to a possible immediate cutback in their Colorado River water supply, that according to the Arizona Daily Star. Is that real? Can you confirm that?
So the letter from the secretary really is asking the states to consider a.
So it already went into effect. I read that other article where we're going to lose a 500,000 acre feet of water. That's what they're talking about here. It already went through. So we're not getting that water this year and for the foreseeable future too.
A proposal by the secretary that would include moving water from reservoirs above Lake Powell into Lake Powell, and also moving less water from Lake Powell into Lake Mead, again, to protect the infrastructure and the ability to move water from Lake Powell to Lake Mead. And the letter uses the words health and safety, and it will come down to that. This is really getting to a health and safety issue.
When they say health and safety, whose health and whose safety are they talking about?
The health and safety of those who want to turn on the tap and have wet water.
Look at this guy's face. He's shocked. He's shocked that people are going to get their water cut off in Arizona. And you know what? Like, It's sad, but this is our reality. This is gonna happen.
Meaning it might not be there?
It might not be there, again, not tomorrow, not in the next couple of years, but out into the future. These systems and those reservoirs are very large and things move relatively slowly. As long as you can move that water through those dams, through that infrastructure, which is now becoming at risk.
The secretary also is also warning, or I think it's assistant secretary, is also warning about a potential threat to the city of Page and to areas of the Navajo Nation if if something goes wrong on Lake Powell.
So again, that's an infrastructure issue, and if you cannot move water through the power generators at Lake Powell, you might not be able to get water to Page, and then Page provides water to the Lachee chapter of the Navajo Nation as well.
Will Arizona agree to the Interior Department's request to cut back by September?
We are still evaluating that, so I can't say yet what our response will be.
What is the impact of the mega drought and more recently man-made climate change, human-caused climate change on what's happening? For example, the river counts on the runoff from the Colorado snowpack. There's a pretty decent snowpack, but the runoff just isn't there as it's been in the past. What is that telling you?
Right, so last year there was almost 90% snowpack and only 32% runoff. That is because
So what's happening is it's a lot warmer here. So plants are starting to leaf out sooner as the ice is melting. Things are starting to come back to life because it's a lot warmer. So the roots of these plants are using this water before it can get into the river. So climate change is definitely affecting the snow melt that gets into these waterways.
the soil is drier, the water seeps into the soil instead of the river.
Yes,
The snow turns into a gas instead of water
it
because of wind
evaporates.
and other atmospheric conditions. And more of the trees and vegetation are growing earlier in the year. So when the snow starts melting, the trees are growing and it takes up some of the water. So it is a trend we have seen over the last 10 years or so that the runoff is not equating to the snowpack. And it is a huge concern moving forward.
So even if you have a good snowpack, like 90%, and only 30% of that is ending up in the river, is kind of a disaster. And a lot of that has to do with just how dry and hot it is here. And it's becoming drier and hotter. So we're losing some of that to evaporation. We're losing that to some of that to the soil and the plants as it moves through the landscape instead of most of that water getting into the river, into the waterways.
Of what our future is going to be with the river.
So talk about that future. Does the future look like it did just 3 years ago? You've talked about, I think before the committee in Congress, about changes in lifestyle, pretty serious changes in the way we do things. What do you see in the next 3 to 5 years?
So in 2026, we need to have a new framework to operate the dams, the reservoirs, the river, et cetera. We will struggle with looking at how much we anticipate the river will provide long term and what that means for all the allocations.
So one of the things that I'm very curious about is what's going to happen to all these cannabis facilities that use tons of water when these water restrictions hit. That's something I've been very curious about because they use ginormous RO filters and they are wasting a lot of water and it just goes down the drain.
In all of the 7 states in Mexico that rely on the river. And there isn't enough water to meet all of the allocations. And we're going to have to cut back. And those cuts will largely be permanent. There might be some wet years when we get our full allocation, but we're going to have to learn to live with less water.
What does that life look like?
So that life is difficult to predict because, again, different water providers have different water portfolios. So you might see more calls for conservation. You might see harder calls for more xeriscape, low water use landscape, things like that.
Yes, get rid of your grass. If you're not from Arizona and you came in here and you put some grass, I forgive you. You messed up. It's all right. People mess up. I forgive you. But now is the time to get with it, get with the program, get rid of that grass. It's time to get rid of grass It's time to get rid of 100 fruit trees in one urban lot. That is over. We had a good little run. Now it's time to get serious.
That
And again, for folks who are new here, xeriscape means what?
more desert adapted plants that use very little water.
And less grass.
And grass is not xeriscape. It uses
Grass,
a lot of water.
a lot of water, and maybe grass's time is up. The legislature, the governor, have $5 billion in surplus cash at their disposal. What's your advice to them on how to use it when it comes to water?
I am supportive of the governor's statement in his State of the State speech where he wanted to make $1 billion investment into the water future of Arizona. There is potentially legislation to create a new Arizona Water Authority that would look at augmenting our water supplies and also helping to build infrastructure to deploy current water supplies, to use recycled water.
So this is why I'm frustrated with this guy. He's been in this position for 40 years, and all this stuff should already be in place, right? Like people have been way too complacent in the desert. This man saw the development boom in Phoenix, and he didn't go all out to make sure this stuff was happening, you know? And I'm not placing the blame on his shoulders or nothing like that, but if you have a position like this, like you gotta work it, man. You can't just be like coming on the news when the drought is here and saying we gotta do this in 2, 3 years or whatever. It's not gonna happen in 2, 3 years. The political system is so corrupt, and these big corporate farms have a lot of lobbying power here, and they block a lot of this legislation that would be good for conserving water.
And to take advantage of every drop of water we have, including doing some conservation programs and perhaps conservation programs with agriculture who still use over 70% of our water.
You've been in this business 40 years. Did you ever think this day would come?
I never thought this day would come this quickly.
So I knew this was gonna come, and I've been acting accordingly. I have my rainwater harvesting tanks. I have my gray water system in place. We did the work to do deep in-ground gardens. I dug one of my gardens 6 feet down to create a huge sponge. Like I went all out. We have our sub-irrigated planters. Fuck raised beds. If you're here and you're using a raised bed, I forgive you too. Like you messed up. It's okay. We all mess up sometimes. But if you have a raised bed in Arizona, you're messing up. You need to switch over to a sub-irrigated planter. Hashtag fuck raised beds.
But I think we always knew that this day was potentially out there. And there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I think we can deal with it if we hunker down, if we get the water authority passed, and we start to look at both the short-term solutions and the long-term solutions. And there's no longer a one-size-fits-all. It will be cobbling together many small actions.
Many small actions. You know, in researching this interview, I thought of a quote from a Hemingway novel, Sun Also Rises. Maybe you read it. The question was, how did you go bankrupt? And the character answered, gradually, then suddenly. And I thought that perfectly describes our situation. You're smiling as I'm saying that.
Yeah, and we have been using the bank accounts that are created in Lake Powell and Lake Mead for the last 20 years, and it is gradual, and it becomes sudden if the reservoirs are empty. And our task is to avoid the outcome in which the reservoirs are empty.
And it's getting pretty close to sudden.
And it's getting near, and it's getting more difficult.
Tom Poshadsky, thank you so much for your work.
Yeah, so that's kind of depressing. Okay.
Superstition Vistas is supposed to be big. Like drive for half an hour and still not hit the end of it big.
So I'm sharing this video so that y'all can see how insane the real estate developers are in Arizona. And this is a manifestation of how capitalism has played out in the drylands. Now, whenever I mention capitalism on the YouTube, people get all upset and whatever. But you know what? This is America. This is not a socialist country. This is not a communist country. This is a capitalistic country. This is capitalism at work in Arizona where I live. I'm going to talk about it. The real estate developers are insane. And this is going to show you how insane they really are.
From Gold Canyon south along the edge of Queen Creek to Florence and all the way up to the Tonto National Forest. 1 million people or so. That's a town twice the size of Tucson. And right now, there isn't water for the whole project.
So these real estate developers bought all this land with the intention of developing it and making it into another urban core without thinking about the water. What were they thinking about? What were they thinking about? They're thinking about making money, right? So this is not communism. This is not socialism. This is capitalism. And this is unbridled capitalism. And it's the same problem with the big farms, which we'll get into a little bit later. But the real estate developers in Arizona are a big problem in terms of if you get your water cut off, it's gonna come down to where your house was built.
It is huge. When we wrote the report, one of the things we said is this could be the San Fernando Valley of Phoenix.
How delusional is this man? San Fernando Valley of Phoenix in the freaking desert with no water.
Grady Gamage Jr. helped write the first reports for Superstition Vistas. His projections at the time, 900,000 people by 2060.
So again, these boomers are just out of control. This guy is a boomer, man. And this guy, look at his office. He's in downtown Phoenix. He's not gonna live to 2060. This guy's just trying to make some money right now. This guy is a capitalist. This guy right here is not a communist. He's not a socialist. He is a capitalist. And this is what the capitalists are doing in Arizona, specifically the real estate developers.
We can grow another 1 million people or
No, we cannot.
more, frankly. But we have to start.
This guy said or more. Nope.
Making tough choices.
Tough choices, Gamage wrote, because this whole strip of desert has no water rights. There was never farming here, so there's no canals. No canals means no Colorado River water. They could use groundwater, which is what some developments do, then buy water somewhere else and pump it into the ground. The West Valley developed mostly using that option. But Gamage says that's probably not the popular idea.
So the West Valley in Phoenix was built under this model right here. So it's the same model. That's why a lot of the investors, like the people with capital that put their capital into this project to get a return on their investment through real estate, they were sold on the idea because it has already been done on the west side of the valley, where you build a huge planned community and you pump water into the ground from elsewhere because it's not on the Colorado River system. It doesn't have water rights, just like this place right here doesn't have water rights. So this is part of the problem. This is part of why we're running out of water. Now, these are not the biggest users. The corporate farms are by far the biggest users, but building communities in areas where there's no water rights and have no access to groundwater, we have to bring it in and pump it into the ground, is not sustainable. This is a business. They're just trying to flip these homes and make some money.
It used to be, because groundwater is like oil. It's not endlessly renewable.
We need to make some significant changes in the way we operate water law systems in Arizona.
You know, one of the things
So what do you think he means when he says that? Like, our water laws are super relaxed already. Like, I'm not getting the vibe from that man that he's saying we have to be more strict and maybe we shouldn't have been able to build here. That's not the vibe I'm getting from him. Like, I don't know what's going on in his brain where he thinks that you can build a city twice the size of Tucson right next to Phoenix over there. It's even drier up there than it is in Tucson, and somehow it's gonna work out. It's not gonna work out. All these people are gonna lose their water if they would have been able to get this off the ground sooner.
worked on was, more sustainable development. And I think over the last 15 years, That's happened in the region.
Mike Hutchinson was the project director for Superstition Vistas. He's still involved, but now he leads the East Valley Partnership.
When we talk about it, we always had to remind people it's a 50-year project. There's a lot of smart people thinking of ways. Now, will it cost more money? Yes.
All these smart people miss the fact that you're in the desert and you don't have water for this ginormous development. It's just so crazy the way that capitalism works and the scarcity of resources. And it's just a spiral to the bottom. Like they're still building here. Look at there's still all this right here costs money, right? All these people are getting paid. All these heavy machines cost money to bring out here and pay an operator, and they're still doing it.
Those smart people have a lot of work to do. Superstition Vistas is in Pinal County, a place so strapped by drought that the state stopped letting builders use any groundwater at all. In 2019, the State Department of Water Resources said the county didn't have enough groundwater to keep up with its projected growth. Instead, developers have to bring in their own water. The state land department owned all of Superstition Vistas until recently. The land went up for auction in 2020, but most of it has not been sold yet. But the first chunk in the 50-year plan has already broken ground. It's 4 square miles out of 270.
This first piece is the launching off part, and 4 square miles is just one initial piece.
So to me, in my brain, what I'm thinking is they had to do these 4 square miles to get something out of all of this investment for their investors. They're just trying to like not have it be a complete loss. And they shouldn't even be building those houses right now.
Comanche Junction City Manager Brian Powell says it has the water, but only for those 4 square miles.
These 10,000 homes will not have grass in the front yard. That was part of the development agreement we did. We prepared for many.
So how crazy is it? That guy, all these smart people over here had to be talked into not putting in grass into this development. That means that when they originally were coming in here, they didn't have any vision for sustainability. They really thought that they could go in here and make a San Fernando Valley of Arizona without no water. And just now they're like, oh yeah, well, we can't do grass. This is just pure insanity.
Many years that before this land was even going to go to auction, to have that provision of water availability to be secured.
Apache Junction says they rely on Colorado River water, and they have some to spare, but not for the whole desert. All of that is still dry. William Pitts, 12 News.
Okay, so real estate developers are a huge part of the problem. Huge part of the problem.
Meantime, the ABC 15 Impact Earth team tracking the historically low water levels at Lake Mead. Now, yesterday, water levels fell just a hair above 1,070 feet, breaking yet another record. It's unlikely water levels at Lake Mead, which is the reservoir for the Colorado River, will rise another 5 feet by the end of this year. Now, if that doesn't happen, it's going to trigger massive water cuts across Arizona.
So we're already there.
It's official. Water cuts are coming, and Arizona will be taking on most of the burden of this. The federal government today declaring the first ever water shortage at Lake Mead.
For months, the ABC 15 Impact Earth team has been tracking the falling water levels there at Lake Mead. It is the largest reservoir in the United States, but now it's holding less water than it has any time in history.
So tonight, meteorologist Jorge Torres explains how we got here and what happens next.
For 20 years, the winding Colorado River.
So I just want to point out this guy said 420.
That 40 million Americans depend on has.
Meteorologist Jorge Torres explains
Check
how we
out.
got here and
It's
what
coming.
happens next.
It's coming. 420.
For 20 years, the winding Colorado River that 40 million Americans depend on has been losing water consistently and rapidly.
What is alarming this year is how fast things turned around and how fast the lake levels have declined.
And now, the levels at Lake Mead are too low for the status quo to continue.
We're not surprised with the Tier 1 shortage declaration.
Not surprised. Not surprised either, Haley. I'm with you. I'm with you here.
Though it is very significant.
Meaning millions of gallons of water will not be going down the CAP canal starting in 2022.
It will affect the...
So that's the other really crazy thing is that there's a 400-mile network of canals in Phoenix that's just kind of like an open canal. That is just a lot of that water is evaporating. Even when I was younger, living in Phoenix, because I'm originally from Phoenix, I always thought that was really, really crazy.
The lower basin states of Arizona and Nevada, and also the country of Mexico, will all have to take much more significant water cutbacks in 2022.
So here's how the tier system works according to the 2019 Drought Contingency Plan. If lake levels at Meade are below 1,075 feet, Tier 1 mandatory cuts are put in place for those areas just mentioned. Now, as of today, lake levels are at 1,067 feet, well below that threshold. Now, there are other tiers too if the water levels drop further, which is possible in the coming years.
So what is the likelihood that in, say, 2022 or 2023, we're going to see even deeper cuts? I think that'll be a story to watch.
Haley Paul.
I believe it's going to happen. So I think right now is the time to invest in your infrastructure if you are planning on staying in Arizona. If you're not planning on staying in Arizona, it's a good time to transition to wherever you are going to go. If you're thinking about coming to Arizona, I would say look somewhere where there's water because it's going to get bad here.
Paul with the Arizona Audubon Society says different factors have brought the Colorado to this low point, including over-allocation.
This would have caught up to us eventually, even without climate change, because we politicians overpromised back in the 1920s what the river could offer. And so I think overall, we all need to get with the program of learning to live with a smaller river.
Farmers in Pinal County will have to.
That means that if you're a permaculture, a designer in Phoenix, you need to stop telling people to plant hundreds of fruit trees in their urban lots. That's what that means, y'all. That is not sustainable. Don't do it. Learn how to farm native edible plants.
To learn to live without as much water, 65% less water, in fact, since these cuts affect them first. But what about the rest of us? Nothing to worry about, says Kim Mitchell of Western Resource Advocates, at least for now.
Communities need to acknowledge that this is not just a temporary weather pattern that we hope will improve. It's likely here to stay for generations.
And with the valley rapidly growing per the latest U.S. Census, water management will be even more important in the years and decades to follow.
That's what's absolutely insane about Arizona is that the cost of living here is low. So a lot of people are coming here, and it's been like that for my entire life, really. I've seen the city of Phoenix completely explode in my lifetime. We don't have the water for it. We just don't have the water for it.
We can dial that down. And we need to learn to adapt to these changing conditions by reducing our demand and, the old adage, live within our means.
For Impact Earth.
If climate change keeps doing what we think it's going to do,
Jorge Torres.
I think that we absolutely need to be prepared and be planning for more severe cuts.
ABC 15, Arizona.
So this is about the insanity that is our groundwater laws and how big corporate farms are taking advantage of us citizens of Arizona.
I'm Chief Meteorologist Amber Sullins. All new at 6:30. Worries now about groundwater. For years, there's been plenty to go around. But as ABC 15 investigator Courtney Holmes shows us, some in rural Arizona actually fear that lax laws are going to leave the wells pumped dry.
A well like this can pump thousands of gallons of water per minute. No questions asked, no permission needed. It's a practice that's depleting aquifers across our state. And for years, the legislature has refused to do anything about it. The last significant stretch of
If you bought a house here on a well and you think you're good, you're probably more vulnerable than people in the cities because the wells have no regulation whatsoever. A big corporate farm could set up shop in your town and use it all, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it.
historic Route 66 winds through downtown Kingman in northwestern Arizona. It's a place that started as a railroad town in the 1880s. Today, tourism is the draw, but what sustained the city and surrounding area of 70,000 people is the water beneath it.
Our water source is groundwater.
City Manager Ron Foggin says they take preserving it very seriously.
Or put water back into the aquifer, over 1 million gallons a day.
Problem is, what they're putting in will likely be pumped out by someone else, and they have no idea who or how much they'll be using.
It is a resource that has to be managed, and It has to be managed and controlled by everybody that's utilizing it.
But in most of Arizona, that is not happening. This part of Mojave County relies completely on the Hualapai Basin for its water. Never really a concern before, but in 2012, something changed.
This used to be just virgin desert, right? And you look out here now, just thousands and thousands and thousands of pistachio trees.
County Supervisor Travis Lingenfelter says farming operations from as close as California and as far as Saudi Arabia moved in, and they just...
So again, this is capitalism. And for all the folks that hate it when I talk about capitalism, I'm going to remind you that this is America. We are not a socialist country. We are not a communist country. Capitalism is the economic system that we're operating under. And this is what capitalism looks like in my state. You can come here as a big corporate farm with your investors, aka capital, buy a bunch of land, set up your farm, and pump as much groundwater as you want. And no one is going to stop you. There's very little permits. This is why 80% of the water that is used in Arizona is used by farms, because we are a farm-friendly state. And if you have the capital to set up a ginormous farm and clear a bunch of desert, you know, you can set up tons and 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 tons of trees. They're going to use so much water. These are not desert adapted trees. These are trees that use a lot of water, and they get ginormous, like 40 feet tall.
just pop up out of nowhere. 2 years ago, this pistachio farm north of Kingman did not exist.
All these trees are now, drawing upon our finite groundwater supply, and they will be for years. This farm didn't have to go through any sort of planning and zoning process.
Because Arizona has no regulation of its groundwater for agriculture in rural areas. That's about 80% of the state.
And you can come in and you can drill as many wells as you want, pump as much as you want, not have to tell anybody.
And the secret is out. He points to state data that shows a significant increase in large commercial wells. Prior to 2013, 97 were on this basin. 8 years later, another 85 in the ground.
The average household uses about 250.
So as you catch that, they about doubled the amount of corporate wells. So that's not like a family homesteading. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the capitalists coming into our state and using up our finite resources, in this case, our groundwater. So if you're in Kingman and you're watching this, I would suggest you sell your house like right now and you go to another state or something. Definitely don't go into Kingman and buy a house. It is so sad, but the reality is that there might not be groundwater in Kingman in 5, 6, 7 years. It's gonna happen. Like this man is saying, it's a finite resource, and all these big corporate farms are moving in and encroaching on the groundwater, and they cannot do anything about it because the state is set up to encourage this. For many, many, many years, this is the sort of business investment that the state has focused on. This is the type of capital that the state has been trying to attract.
Gallons of water a day. A lot of these wells that we're talking about are drilled at a size that are like 3,000 gallons per minute, 3,500 gallons per minute.
There's no way to know how much is being used. Large agricultural wells don't have to report it. But educated estimates from the county put large farm usage at more than 34,000 acre-feet for 2021. For perspective, the city of Kingman used about 8,000 acre-feet last year.
So the entire city of Kingman used 8,000 acre-feet. 8,000 times 4, yep. That is quadruple the amount of water that the entire city of Kingman uses to sustain itself.
21. For perspective, Monitor, Kingman used about 8,000 acre-feet last year. And efforts to monitor commercial usage are going nowhere.
How many times have you dropped this bill?
4 times. 4 times.
Has it ever gotten out of committee?
No.
Representative Regina Cobb's bill would allow county supervisors to implement rural management areas for groundwater basins at risk. A committee of local residents would be formed.
And then they design a plan to help them get recharge, be able to keep.
There's no way that the capitalist class is going to allow people to tell them what they can and can't do with our collective resources. This is part of the problem with capitalism, and this is part of the problem with the way it's manifesting itself in rural communities in Arizona. Now, again, you can be upset that I'm saying the word capitalism, but I'm going to remind you, this is America. This is not a socialist country. This is not a communist country. This is capitalism, and this is what capitalism looks like here in my state, in the rural areas like Kingman.
Keep that aquifer healthy again.
The bill, never discussed in the House Natural Resources Committee, ABC 15 reached out to committee chair Gail Griffin to find out why. She did not respond.
The reason why is because politicians like that lady are corrupt, and they are bought off by these corporate farms. Unfortunately, in the United States, lobbying is totally legal, and lobbying is a legalized form of bribery. You can lobby your representatives, your lawmakers, and pretty much buy them off. It is a legalized form of bribery, and that's why these bills are never going to make it. That's why the political infrastructure is completely corrupt, and it has been captured by the capitalist class. And again, you can take issue with the way I am analyzing this, but I'm correct. I'm correct here. These big corporate farms are exerting their power and their influence in our corrupt political system so that they can do things like this. Set up a ginormous pistachio farm that is going to rely on a finite resource, which is Kingman, Arizona's groundwater, to make money so they can sell some pistachios. So this Kingman is going to lose its groundwater so that these guys from Saudi Arabia and from out of state can make some money selling pistachios.
But the Arizona Farm Bureau did. It opposes the legislation, saying in a statement in part, attempts to regulate groundwater must represent appropriate balance between the unique needs of local communities, including all agricultural users. The concepts proposed in this legislation do not strike that balance.
So again, the regulatory bodies have been captured by the capitalist class, and the Farm Bureau in particular is going to be super corrupt when it comes to these things, because they are pretty much puppets of these big corporate farms.
Now folks in Mojave County want Governor Ducey to include the measure in his plan to create a state water authority.
Doing nothing is not an option.
But nothing is exactly what Liggenfelter is afraid of.
We don't have access to Colorado River water. We don't have access to the canal system. This is it. We depend on this. This is lifeblood for us. And there is.
So what this man says is super critical. If you have a home and it is not connected to the Colorado River through the canal system, you are most likely going to lose your water in the coming decade. And if you are on well water, you are even more likely, in my opinion, to lose your water in the oncoming decade, because these corporate farms are going to use it all up.
There is no plan B.
In Kingman, Courtney Holmes, ABC 15, Arizona.
Okay, this is the last one. This one's interesting.
Well, now to a new 12 News series, Running Dry, where we'll take a look at the worsening drought in our state and the repercussions of our water sources diminishing. Imagine finding your dream home and then being told no one has to give you water to live there.
In a remote area north of Scottsdale, homeowners are being told that they'll run out of water this December. They're being cut off from their water supply as the drought worsens and cities tighten restrictions on where their water goes.
Team 12's.
So remember the water czar, I forget the guy's name, he was saying, oh, in 2-3 years, 2024, 2025, it's already happening. This is in Scottsdale. It's not 2023, 2024, it's 2022, and this is happening. People are losing their water. And the reason is because there's no groundwater here in this particular spot in the Rio Verde foothills. There's no groundwater. They are not connected to the Colorado River or the canal system. So they have to truck in water. And the city of Scottsdale has to cut off these communities that these real estate developers created to make money, knowing that these people were going to lose their water rights in a severe drought. Again, this is how capitalism has played out in the drylands here in the Sonoran Desert. in Arizona, and the real estate developers are partly responsible for this crisis and how it's manifesting itself in regards to people losing their water because where they decided to build the homes and how they decided to build the homes.
William Pitts talked to the homeowners who are now fighting to save their community.
These jugs,
this is all captured rainwater,
are Lee Harris's insurance policy. Jugs of water lined up, saved up.
Yeah. So this is just so incredibly sad to see an older woman like that with all that water because they're going to get cut off in December is just heartbreaking.
Because this is the only way Lee can get water.
It's 5,000 gallons under here.
John Hornewer comes every...
I have installed, or I'm not like an expert in doing it, but I have helped install underground ginormous rainwater harvesting tanks. And if you have the money to do that, I would say get on it right now, because you can harvest rainwater and have it go in there, and you can also add potable water to it like this lady is doing. And if you have land, I would definitely do that. You can drive over them just like this big old truck drove over it. It's a very good infrastructure investment here for the drylands. So I like that this lady did that. It's going to make her life a lot easier living in an area with no water.
A week or so to fill up the tank by truck. He services most of the homes in Rio Verde foothills because there's no other option. So where does John get his water? Right now from a pipe at the edge of the Scottsdale city limits. It's Scottsdale's water, and they want to keep it.
They've been warning us since 2016 that this was approaching.
Scottsdale told the people of the Rio Verde foothills that they were cutting them off at the end of 2022.
As water becomes such a more scarce, precious resource, yeah, if the cities are taking care of their own, and rightfully so.
They've had years to find another source of water.
We thought we could also drill a well, so that was an option, but we decided not to, and now it was a good decision. The neighbor drilled right across the street, 1,300 feet down, and didn't hit a drop.
1,300.
So if you're as state and you're coming here thinking, oh, I'll just put in a well, A, you're kind of part of the problem. B, you can build a house in a random part of the desert, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be groundwater there. That person spent $80K, went 13,000 feet down, and got nothing but air, no water.
100 feet at a cost of $80,000 or more, and maybe no water at the bottom of it. Some houses can't even take that chance.
There's areas like in this area where we're standing right now where they have too much arsenic, and so you could put in a well, but now you can't drink the water.
So that's another very good point. We have a lot of minerals in our soil, and when you have a lot of minerals, that means that sometimes you have a lot of heavy metals like arsenic. You could spend $80K, hit water, and then when you test it, it's full of arsenic and you can't use it. Building a well is kind of a gamble in most parts of Arizona.
The realtor actually told us, great news, you're on hauled water because wells can go dry and they break and they're very expensive, and you'll...
The real estate developer told her, good news, you're on hauled water. How insane is that? And then people are like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to buy this house. I would never buy a house where it's on hauled water in the drylands. So it's just kind of a little window into the insanity that's been happening here. And I don't know if these people are from Arizona, but I'm venturing that they're not native Arizonans. They probably moved here from out of state, and they got taken advantage of. It's very sad.
Always have water coming to your home, and these water trucks will always be in service. So when I bought my house, I actually felt better that I was on hauled water.
John can keep hauling water to the houses, but he'll have to find another source.
I have a source in Buckeye. I have a source in Maricopa.
If it sounds like he's saying he's got a guy, it's because he is. He doesn't want to say any more. But how did Rio Verde foothills even get here? The short answer is development. In Maricopa County, you don't have to guarantee a water supply if you subdivide into 5 or fewer lots.
Did you catch that? If you subdivide into 5 or fewer lots, you do not have to guarantee a water supply as a real estate developer, because again, capitalism is all about just making money. It's not about taking care of people. It's not about taking care of the environment. It's not about building something that's going to last forever, sustainable, yada, yada, yada. It's about making money. So these real estate developers made money off of these people and they're gone. They're gone. They made their money and they dipped.
That's basically what happened.
You're right here.
In this entire area.
50% of the land is undeveloped out here. So, and county is issuing building permits.
And construction is still happening, even as these homeowners.
So everyone likes the revenue, and these people are being taken advantage of, right? They probably paid a lot for a house with no water rights. And this is what I mean when I say that real estate developers are part of the problem. The reason I say that is because a lot of the people that are going to get their water cut off in the next year, 2023, 2024, are going to be people like this, where they bought a house that has no water rights, and they might not know it right now because they have running water, but it's going to be a rude awakening when the cities have to tighten their belts and they have to look at who doesn't have water rights and cut them off. So if you're in Arizona, it's very important to figure out what your situation is so that you're prepared for the future. Real estate developers are not your friends. They're not here to look out for your best interest. They're still building houses here. They're still building houses here, and they're going to make tons of money off of these houses. These houses are probably going for $250,000, $500,000. So it's just unbridled capitalism. It's completely out of control, and people are being taken advantage of. And again, if you don't like that I am critiquing capitalism, this is not a communist country. This is not communism. This is not a socialist country. This is not socialism at work. This is capitalism. And this is what capitalism has done in the rural communities in Arizona. This is not in the city. This is in the desert. They're going into the desert, clearing out small plots of it to build 5 homes and fit under this loophole where you don't have to guarantee these people water.
Homeowners struggle to find water.
The county has let us know they have no obligation to require water when issuing a building permit.
So without wells and water hauling sketchy at best, the foothills have been trying the only thing they have left: form a DWID, a designated water improvement district. According to the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority of Arizona, the improvement district allows the people who use the water to take shared responsibility of managing their own supply. The DWID can bring in water in multiple ways, including pumping from nearby sources, building canals and piping, and buying privately owned water systems.
The only way we can do that is get a piece of property away from this area in an area of Arizona that still has water rights property for sale. Be able to convey that to the CAP canal, have it brought to Scottsdale, who will wheelhouse it, process it, and deliver it to the end of their terminus pipelines at the top of our hill here in Rio Verde.
If that's
So again, in Arizona, property with water rights is king. If you invest in a property with water rights, they have to work with you. They have to supply you water. That's where these people didn't. Now they know, but when they first bought their homes, they didn't. So it's unfortunate, but this is gonna be a common thing that's gonna be happening in the next couple years as this drought worsens.
It sounds complicated. It is. What makes it even more complicated is that it requires county approval, and Maricopa County hasn't brought it up for a vote, ever. The Foothills homeowners are now suing the county to get them to move. Maricopa County refused to comment because of the lawsuit, but the homeowners say there's nothing else they can do.
So worried. I think I wake up every single morning thinking about it and go to sleep every single night thinking about this. If this gets shut off and we have no water, where do we go? It's not easy to pack up, ducks and chickens and your whole family and go somewhere else.
Lee's solution is to save every drop she can.
This may have to be potable water for us, but we don't get enough rainstorms to be able to supply us 46 million gallons of water. And we have to find a way of replacing that, not short term, but long term.
William Pitts, 12 News.
Not exactly comforting news.
No.
We will continue our special series, Running Dry, with a look at one industry in the valley that's known to take up a lot of water.
Yeah, is the business worth the cost? That is coming up tonight at 10.
The business is not worth the cost, in case you're wondering, y'all. It's not worth the cost. It's just not. So that concludes today's little discussion here that I'm trying to create. Now, this picture right here is of my fruit trees. I have 27 trees on my property. Only 2 of them are fruit trees. And this one is a fig, this one is a pomegranate. These trees, I only use rainwater and gray water to irrigate them. I do not use any tap water. The gray water technically is tap water, but it is wastewater from the washing machine. So when we do our laundry, it feeds these fruit trees. This fig tree is older than my kids. That pomegranate is older than my son. It's about the same age as my daughter. And they're thriving. They're thriving. We get so much production off of them. The other 25 trees we have here on our property are native edible trees. I installed this culvert tank before any of my kids were born a long time ago. I knew that the water was going to run out. I knew that it's going to run out. And I knew that we had to drop money on our infrastructure so that we would have some water. This is a 1,000-gallon tank. We have more tanks than this. And I suggest that you guys invest in your infrastructure right now. Right now is the time. You don't want to wait for the drought to get super, super bad, and then all the people that know how to install tanks and do water harvesting are super busy because everyone's calling them at the last minute and trying to do sustainability work all last minute. So get on it, y'all. Get on it. Get on your infrastructure. Install some rainwater harvesting earthworks. These trees right here are in rainwater harvesting earthworks. So when it rains, they get infused with rainwater. This whole side channel right here is connected to the street, and it gets full of street water. I am harvesting over 100,000 gallons of street runoff into my property every single year. And that was one of the first things I did when I met my wife and I moved into her home, because this is my wife's home. We fell in love, we got married, all that stuff. And one of the first projects we did together was installing all of our rainwater harvesting infrastructure. So that would be the basins, the earthworks, the tanks. All of our gardens are rainwater harvesting earthworks. I dug the largest garden that we have, our largest in-ground garden. I dug it down 6 feet to create a massive sponge. If you're in Arizona and you're growing in a raised bed, you are messing up. That is not sustainable. Raised beds heat up and they drain really well. So that means it takes a lot more water to grow the same amount of food that I can grow in the ground. I can grow more food than you can in your raised bed using less water, doing it in a rainwater harvesting earthwork in the ground. So I'm on team #fuck raised beds. They're not appropriate for the Sonoran Desert or for any dry land environment. If you do have to garden in a container because you have a bad back or you're in a wheelchair or something like that, I would suggest that you convert a stock tank into a sub-irrigated planter. And I have tutorials on my YouTube for free on how to do that. I also have tutorials on my Patreon that walk you through how to do that. Really quick, I want to take some time to thank my Patreon community. They are the reason I can do these videos. You can see my son has a GoPro on a hat. A couple of years ago, my computer died, and I was able to save up my Patreon money and invest in a computer. I was able to save up my Patreon money and invest in a GoPro. And I'm not like making tons of money off of Patreon or anything like that, but it does help keep the channel going because I can invest in audio equipment in video equipment. And I'm not making money off of this channel or anything. This is just kind of a labor of love. I feel there is a lot less, there's very little good information on how to grow in the Sonoran Desert and how to do it in a way that's actually sustainable. A lot of the information out there is planting a bunch of fruit trees that are not from here, like bananas and mangoes, and that's insane. To me, that's insane. So the whole reason I started this YouTube channel was to help people garden here in a way that is more sustainable and true permaculture, because permaculture is establishing a regenerative system, right? So that's why we have 27 trees, only 2 of them are fruit trees, the rest of them are native edible trees. That is a regenerative system. When I pass away, these fruit trees might not still be here, but all those native plants are still going to be here, and they're going to be self-propagating themselves. They already do that. I have to pull up palo verdes, mesquites all the time because they're planting themselves all over the yard. And my space will rewild itself when I'm gone. And that is a regenerative system. These native plants thrive solely on rainwater here in an area where we get 12 inches of rain or less. I've been consistent over the years. I've been super consistent with harvesting rainwater, with making your own compost. You don't have to buy all kinds of fancy inputs to grow food and stuff like that. I have a awesome Patreon community. Most of the content is available for $2. I do have a $10 membership tier where they get access to my Prop 207 garden content and is exclusive to the $10 members. The $5 members get a seed care package and access to the content. The $10 members get a seed care package, a pound of my custom mineral mix that I use to make my own potting soil and top dress plants with, and it's very versatile. So if you like the work that I'm doing here on the YouTube and you like the content that I'm producing, please consider tipping me every month if you can. A $2 tip every month goes a long way. I have, I think, 1,700 subscribers on YouTube. If I can get like 200 people to tip me $2 a month, that would literally change my life. Like in terms of being able to dedicate more time to this and being able to pump out more videos. So don't feel like, oh, I can't sign up at the $5 or $10, like $2 members are just as important to me as the $5 and $10 members. And it's just a tip. You're just tipping me every month. I am consistent with uploading to my Patreon account every week. Every Friday, I drop new content on my Patreon account. And this video that you're seeing right now was uploaded first to my Patreon community before it made it to the YouTube channel. So that's kind of the way I do it, is everything goes up on the Patreon first, and then it gets published on YouTube afterwards, after it's been up exclusive for the Patreon members. Some of the content is exclusive to the Patreon community. I have full tutorials that you can only access if you're a Patreon member. I also have a Prop 207 workshop series that is available for my $10 Patreon members, where I think it's a 4-part tutorial series, and I'm going to continue adding to that series throughout the year. I feel like I give people a lot of value for the investment that they make into the YouTube channel. I've give people, if you're local, I give people seedlings every year at any membership level. When I have a lot of eggs, I'll hook up people with extra eggs that we can't eat and I don't want them to go bad, so I'll hook up people here locally. And it's easy to just put up a post on Patreon, hey, if you want some eggs, come and pick them up. I really take care of my community, and again, like the $2 members are just as important to me as the $5 and $10 members. I make a very serious effort to make sure people are happy, and I'm producing content that's going to be useful and help people thrive out here in the Sonoran Desert. So please consider joining the Patreon community. I definitely want to get a lot more $2 members, and I really want to get some more of my YouTube followers to support me on the Patreon. Right now, most of my Patreon members are from Instagram, but I feel like if I can get like 50 folks from the YouTube channel, it'll make a huge difference in being able to be more consistent with uploading to the YouTube. So if you want to see more consistent uploads to YouTube, consider tipping me $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever you can afford. I know times are tough right now.